It's 7 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I would just like to remind everybody to silence your cell phones, and the meeting is being videotaped and will be available to view on our website and the local cable channel. So just a reminder that any public comments will be part of that recording. Ken, roll call, please.
Sure. Blackburn,
Present.
Hageman,
Here.
Hedge,
Here.
Howard,
Here.
Jones,
Here.
Craybill,
Here.
Machigian.
Here.
All right, that's 7.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Do I hear a motion for the approval of the regular council meeting minutes from January 22nd, 2024?
I would move to approve the minutes as included in the packet.
I'll support.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. I'm going to ask for a public, if there's any public comment for items not on the published agenda. Seeing none, we're going to move to discussion topics and start with the manager's report.
Thank you, Madam President. I have just a couple of things I want to mention in addition to what's been written and submitted. Just for everyone who's watching, who's here, who'll be watching in the future, the meeting, I know that right now the weather's nice and people tend to want to start cleaning up their lawns. That's great. However, just know that leaf bag and yard waste removal pickup does not start until April 11th. That's still over a month away. If you put stuff out at the curb or at the street side in bags, it will not be collected. So please refrain from doing that. Secondly, I wanted to call attention to our new internet, what do we call this?
New Wi-Fi.
New Wi-Fi. Council guest is the, what? The network?
Yes, that is the network we're using for guests of the village.
And the password is Bingham guest. And finally, I'm going to read a document that we received from the Oakland County Treasurer's Office. And this relates to foreclosure prevention. They provide this to every community in Oakland County every year. The Oakland County Treasurer's Office is in the final stretch of its foreclosure prevention efforts. The tax foreclosure deadline for the 2021 or prior year taxes is April 1st, 2024. That means if these taxes aren't paid off by April 1st or any interested party hasn't entered into a repayment schedule with the Treasurer's Office by then, the property will be foreclosed. Since December of 2023, the Treasurer's Office has conducted over 1,000 taxpayer assistance meetings to assist taxpayers with keeping their properties by working with them to get on a repayment schedule and or by identifying resources that may be beneficial to them in their situation. The office is there to help and strongly encourages taxpayers to contact them before the tax foreclosure deadline if they have delinquent taxes for 2021 or a prior year. Taxpayers interested in scheduling a taxpayer assistance meeting may call that office at 248-858-0611, or they may visit www.oakgov.com/treasurer. They have a wealth of programs and whatnot to help people out. So if anybody out there in the viewing world has any concerns or knows someone that might, feel free to call the Oakland County Treasurer's Office. And that concludes my report, unless people have questions.
What is the status of any, not that I need to know the resident, but do we have residents that have not paid taxes?
I don't think we should discuss that. I don't think we do, but
I was just curious what the status was. I know we have in the past, and I was just curious. I'm glad to see they're getting help.
yeah, me too.
Yeah, they're very helpful. They want to make sure that, within reason, that they give every opportunity to
Sure.
become current.
Sure, good.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ken. Yevgeny, your Economic Development Coordinator / Administrative Assistance Report, anything?
I have no comments unless there are questions from council.
I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for compiling this. I'm an Excel spreadsheet person.
And as you can see, it's still a work in progress, so
Yes.
I'll update you guys once I have more data.
But the 30,600 to 3,800 being the largest 544 plus square feet, 1,000 square feet, has got a good occupancy rate at 82%, but yet there's still 95,000 square feet available. Do you know if there are people who are looking at that, or is that disjointed space?
That's just total space, so it's not continuous 95K square feet.
It's not?
No, I don't imagine so, at least.
Okay.
We do know that Hondros College of Nursing is thinking about expanding. And I don't know if that's contiguous to their space or not, if the vacancy is contiguous, but if they're looking to expand, that would be a great place to do it. Right in the same building.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very much so. And then the other buildings that are 176,000 square feet, that's a considerably lower occupancy rate, like 20 points lower.
Correct.
Is it that they're asking too much, or in comparison to the other building?
To be honest, I'm not the building manager. I don't know what their specific factors are. Depending on the building, they could be many. It could be, all the office buildings within Bingham Farms are buildings that were constructed in the 80s, I believe, which does make them lower down on the list of desirable properties for your new companies that want their shiny new offices. So that is definitely probably a factor. Some buildings are set a little bit further back from Telegraph, so they might not have as much road visibility. I know, for instance, that's definitely one of the things that one of the building managers has told me when I met with them, is, their buildings are behind other buildings. People might not even know they exist back there unless you're going on a commercial real estate listing website, in which case.
And is anything
Obviously,
happening with that Mandolin restaurant property?
I'll let you answer that.
They have an operator that wants to utilize the space. The liquor license belongs to the building owner, so there's no issue with that at all. They just had, I would thought that they would have entered into an agreement by now, but I haven't heard. The last I heard was that it was pending and it was close. I do know, thank you.
Thank you.
I do know that they plan to put in some outdoor seating and things of that nature near the building, off the Telegraph, of course. So if when that occurs, they would certainly need to submit a site plan review, because they're amending their site plan as it currently sits. Hopefully we'll see something sooner than later.
Yeah, because that's been quite a while for that kind of prime piece of property.
And it would not be a Middle Eastern flavored or themed restaurant. It would be something else. That's what the owner of the building told me, but he did not divulge exactly what it would be.
Thank you.
I also, as Trustee Howard, I really appreciated that report and look forward to seeing more updated, you should get more information. I had one other question. Your report indicated that there were 182 business licenses renewals
Yes.
so far. Is that like less than we had last year, more, about the same?
I'll have to double check how it compares to last year for you. I can get back to you later this week, just because I don't have that number off the top of my head. It's definitely less than the first year we rolled out that program, but that was also pre-pandemic.
The number's now, as of today, 189.
Correct.
Okay.
We had some renewals come in today.
Yes.
Are we getting any closer to knowing out of how many, like how many businesses are there that should be getting licenses?
I'll probably be working on comparing that, because the due date for those licenses is the end of this month. So I'll be comparing
Right.
what I have received to what I have in the database of active businesses versus inactive, because there are some businesses that have gone inactive since we started building that database, as well as I'll be pulling info from our tax database for businesses that are not yet in my database because they might be brand new and maybe they didn't know that they're supposed to register. So once I compile all that data, I'll be able to give you a kind of a ballpark of out of how many. But again, sometimes that number of here's how many we have might be incorrect because some of them might have closed without notifying us as well. So it's kind of a moving target every time we calculate that. But
So, when we started discussing the position, I had looked on, and there's internet sites where you can actually get all of the occupancy rates for all the buildings. You get the names of who the managers are and that type of thing. Two questions. How has it changed in the last year, the occupancy rates for the buildings?
I would need to compare it to previous occupancy rates. I just started building this occupancy rate list, so I don't actually have all the numbers to compare it back to. But as I was looking at some data that we had in our systems, some of the buildings did drop. Some of the buildings, even the ones that look like they are in the 60 percentile occupancy, were showing that same occupancy way pre-pandemic as well. So I'm not sure how much of that is the pandemic, how much of it is building specificity where they're just floundering around that
Yeah.
ballpark.
Yeah, the numbers are,
general.
in order to be relevant, need to be compared.
Correct.
So that's kind of information that would really be helpful.
Mhm.
All right, good. All right, thank you.
When did we start the business license? Was that 3 years ago?
The ordinance for it was passed in 2019, so the first year we actually collected them was ironically 2020,
Right.
because due date was March 1st, and then 2 weeks later, the world shut down, so.
Right, right. So the data is still very, very new.
Correct.
You know, this was never done previous to that, so we're
Right.
still, building all the data and creating the systems which will track all of that.
And
And like you said, that first year was kind of a difficult year or two, really.
And in 2021, we actually waived the fee because as a break to vote. I know it's not a whole lot of dollars, but as a break to, just because of the hardship element, we waived the fee for that year.
Right. So the longer we do it, the better the data will get.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I also like the idea that we're doing this because now we can keep track of just the occupancy. And it's nice to know, okay, what isn't working, what is working.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Could you kick that door open for me? I think they're done vacuuming out there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? We are going to move to the fire department monthly report. Our chief is out of town, so the report is in your packet. If you have any questions, you can contact him directly. And we'll go to the police department monthly report. Welcome, chief.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you have our written report in your packet as
Yep.
well. There's just a couple of things I wanted to mention tonight. One, I've been working with Bill on the budget. He now, as of last week, should have our entire proposed budget for the next fiscal year. Obviously, it has not been approved by the Franklin Village Council, but I wanted to get Bill the numbers as quickly as possible to build your budget. There are a couple of things driving it. It's up, our proposal is up about 4.2% from last year. There are basically two things that are drivers of that. One is healthcare costs. Carriers are telling us it's going to go up 7 to 10% next year. And the other is our retirement contributions to MERS is also way up about 7% as well. So that's accounting for quite a bit of the change as to why it's going up over 4%, at least our request is. So if there's any questions about it, and Bill knows this, if you have any questions as you're going through my proposal, please reach out, give me a call. I'll be glad to answer everything. I have tried to break it down by virtually every of the 30-some line items that there is, so I can probably answer the questions if you have any. The only other thing that I'll mention, I don't really have anything to mention off of our crime report because you have that in front of you. I just wanted to mention one item of good news. So one of our officers' wives just had twins, and so Officer Hall, Logan Hall, and so he will be off for quite some time. It's their first kids. And that is our second set of twins in the last year. We had another officer that also had twins. So I don't know what's going on with the water in Franklin, but I'm not drinking it. So. But we're happy for them. Everybody's healthy and home, and so we're thrilled about that.
Having had twins, there is life after twins.
Yes. Good. That is good. I'll let them know. That's all I have, unless you have questions for me. Yes?
I signed up for the Home Watch because I go to Florida. And on my phone, about 4 or 5 days, maybe a little longer, a week ago, the ring said, "There's motion in your front hallway." And I opened up the camera, and it was 2 police officers inside my house.
Mm-hmm. They found an open door somewhere, yeah.
And it appeared, I couldn't quite see, that one had a gun drawn. Would that have been protocol?
Oh, absolutely. If they're checking a house and they come around and they find a back door open, they don't know who's in there. And you're gone, and so they will be clearing the house with their weapons out until they're sure that there's nobody in there. Absolutely, it's protocol.
I was very relieved, when I saw it on the camera. I called the department afterwards, and the front desk very quickly moved me to the right persons, and I got my report back within 2 or 3 minutes of that call as to what the reason for the entry was. So the efficiency and the peace of mind that you gave was extraordinary. Thank you.
Right. Well, we end up finding 1 or 2 a week like that. What happens a lot of times is that housekeepers or other guests come in and they forgot to close the door in the back or lock the door in the back. That's often what happens. And so, we find, unfortunately, way too many open doors during that. But, we always encourage alarm systems, too. If you don't have an alarm, we think they're a great tool. We really encourage you to have that as well. So.
And in regards to that, the gangs that we talked about in earlier meetings.
In South American, yes.
Yes. What's the status now?
It's interesting. They have not hit anywhere in our area in several, knock on wood for sure, in several months. That could be because they've left our area and moved on to warmer parts of the country this time of year. Part of their method of operation has been that they like to hang out around the house, especially in wooded areas. And I'm not sure that, cold and snow and everything else is conducive for that. So they may have moved to a warmer part of the country. I know California's having a trouble with this same group, and like I said before, the FBI estimates that there's over 100 of these crews operating nationally, but thankfully they haven't been hitting in Michigan, at least not in southeast Michigan, since we last talked. So that's a good thing.
There's just a quick question. Monthly report, Special Assessment District for January. The number of complaints, the count is 46. 2024 year-to-date is 46. And 2023 year-to-date was 40 for the whole year.
Year-to-date.
Oh, that's still year, okay.
That's still year-to-date, yes.
All right, so, never mind.
40, yes.
Just read that.
Yeah. I actually questioned those numbers, too, because we're exactly the same point this year as we were last year. But it runs very similar. Yeah, but that's year-to-date, so all through January of 2022 and 2023. Anybody else?
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Before we move to old business, I just want to reach out to our audience. We have a special guest that has joined us, and I'm wondering if you'd like to address council or you're just visiting.
I'm just coming to say, I haven't come yet. I'm Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. So this is one of my smallest communities, and we are not back in session until the 28th, so I wanted to come and kind of be in space. And I've already met with our city manager here, who's been wonderful. Learned a lot. I'm glad we can own buildings now. That's nice. But we do have a neighborhood service center that's been really phenomenal for my Oakland County residents, and that's in Southfield on Burke Road. And it's 26080 Burke Road. And that's our Oakland, that's going to serve all our 5 communities in Oakland County. But that's where we help people through everyday challenges and issues. from getting a Purple Heart replaced, which is kind of cool, to, you know, folks not hearing from the IRS, to folks even having issues with their Social Security. But because again, I actually was able to connect with Next, which is one of, yeah, it was incredible. I got a tour, visited there, she was amazing, and Congresswoman Haley Stevens and I did it together. I let her know, because it's technically outside of my district, so I wanted to let her know I was gonna come and visit. But it was because I came visit here, picked up the guide, and I was really taken, and I loved it. They serve 3 of my 5 communities. And so we're gonna work with them as they move to their new location, so we can kind of get some federal grant support for that move.
Wow.
But they have been phenomenal go-to, because I'm getting calls from even folks having issues with home repair issues, trying to get their home a little bit better, for maybe in a wheelchair or something, to get better access to their bathrooms. They have just been really responsive and wonderful. So getting you through everyday challenges and issues is going hand in hand with legislative work I'm doing.
Yeah, and I'm sure you know that they have the Meals on Wheels.
Yeah.
They have medical transport.
Gave me a
for-
whole
so-
tour.
Exactly. It's amazing.
But they don't say no.
No.
I don't know if we put that in the record, but they have not, they've just been really wonderful in
Yeah.
that. I've just, you know, as somebody who worked in nonprofit organizations, my folks kind of call me when it's 911 time, it's urgent.
Yeah.
And they have been just really great with my team. And yeah, my constituent services casework folks have been just on it, so. But yeah, folks are getting now the hang of calling our office. I don't care if it's student loans. Passport, I mean, it's huge. Passport's like really, yeah. We're gonna actually have a passport fair and things like that. But the next, I'm not gonna do a town hall. I did a town hall, which was great, but I think we're gonna do a constituent services, kind of fair, where we bring everybody, all the different departments, including passport services. And then I'll do a spill, but then it will be placed to kind of do a one-time shop, kind of connecting
Yeah.
with different agencies. We're gonna try that in Oakland County. I think
idea.
folks like that, so.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Thank
For
you.
coming.
Thanks for.
Welcome.
Yes.
We will move on to old business, and that is the contract for police services. Do you want to take that?
I could-
Or-
let me introduce this.
Okay.
Yeah, so folks, in your packet, you have, there are 2 copies of the proposed amended and restated contract between Franklin and Bingham for police services. There's a red line copy with the proposed changes, and then there's a clean copy with the changes incorporated into it. This has been reviewed by the Police and Fire Subcommittee, our village attorney Dirk Beckerleg, our sort of sitting council attorney person who's retired, Kurt Jones, and the appropriate officials in the village of Franklin. And I wanted you to have it, but after I put this together, I thought to myself, well, while I didn't indicate that that there's a motion attached to this, you could approve the contract. I don't think that would be out of order. If anybody, if it's to everyone's satisfaction and liking, we could certainly entertain a motion. It's up to you, of course.
My question would be is why are we really changing it? I didn't see that much of a difference.
I'll speak to that. There are no like really overwhelming changes.
That's what I saw, yeah.
One of the paragraphs, if you read it the way it currently is now, you could read it that it expired like about 10 years ago, and we're cleaning up that language. There's another provision that involves, at the end of the year, they do an audit, and based on the results of the audit, we can either owe a bunch of money or they can owe us money, depending on how much the actual service was. And the way it used to read was if they had that audit done by the end of December, then we had to pay the money immediately. And that could cause issues with the budget, because you'd be paying this money in December and you'd be in like the middle of the year kind of thing. So
Okay.
We're hopefully gonna change that so that the payment won't be due until the next fiscal year starts, so that you can then budget for it and raise the millage if you have to or whatever, hopefully not, but that was the theory behind that. And they I know when you talked with Franklin, they requested that we put in an amount that if it was no more than $5,000, it could get paid right away, and that seemed fair to me, so we made that change per.
So that we could handle,
Yeah, so per their request. I'm not anticipating that there's gonna be a big fight over this, that's not our intention, but it's just sort of like some cleanup stuff.
Yeah, I was just, because there wasn't a whole heck of a lot of changes, I just wondered why we were throwing it together.
That's why.
I had 2 points. We had talked at the last meeting that we might be thinking about a term of less than 5 years. I guess we come off that.
Yeah,
Discussion.
I don't know whether I should answer this or Ken, because
Go
Ken
for it.
actually had the discussion,
Feel free.
not me, but.
Feel free.
But they're not a big fan of that idea. Franklin's not a big fan of going from a 5-year term to a 3-year term. And one of the reasons that they gave, my understanding is that they think it's a difficult environment to hire new police officers, and they think they'll have better luck if the term is 5 years as opposed to 3 years. And because I think we're all generally happy with the police service, it didn't seem to me like we wanted to push that any further, seeing as how they had they had a reason.
Yeah, again, if it ain't fixed, don't or if it ain't broken, don't fix it.
The split, and maybe I missed it here, but it mentions how the money is split between the two. The cost is split between.
I think there's a
'Cause it's not
formula, it might be in the addendum,
Oh,
but
it's in
I'm
the
not sure.
You're referring to the SAD calculations?
Or the Franklin. Bingham.
Okay, 35%. It's the 35, but so this is locked into the 35, so that's not.
Right, we're not changing
We're not
That I
changing
know
that.
is,
Mhm.
I know there's some folks, I guess, in Franklin that think that's too low. And I'll leave it to the lawyers in the room, but the only edit that didn't seem super clear to me is it's relating to that, the ability for the contract to keep being extended. It says, for the avoidance of doubt, numerous extensions. Numerous seem vague to me. I thought it would say like unlimited extensions. What's the definition of numerous? 2, 3? But I defer to the attorney.
More than one. I mean, thanks the question, I agree, but yeah, I think they didn't want to put a limit out of cap on it, that you could just keep doing this over and over and over.
Yeah, I would have used the term unlimited here, but I defer to you
Don't
guys.
have any issues with that, but.
So the intention would be to, if this council agrees, would be then to move forward with Franklin to try to actually get this signed. And I don't know whether we need a motion for that or just general concurrence.
You
or-
need a motion for that.
Okay, well, I would then move that we task our village manager with going ahead and trying to have these amendments signed by both parties.
Second.
Would you like to include changing that
I was
verbiage?
gonna wait for I was gonna ask if that includes my wording change, but I don't really care about it that much.
Doesn't really make a difference. I mean,
Did it seem as if Franklin was amenable to the changes we had proposed?
The ones that you see before you, yes.
Okay.
If you just eliminate the word numerous, for the avoidance of doubt, extensions shall be allowed.
That's fine.
That is even
Yeah,
bet-
that's
That's a
almost
better
better.
answer, yes. I would,
Well, I mean, the reason why we're adding that is because originally it was unclear whether more than one extension was allowed.
It's still unclear.
when you say extensions plural, it's clear it's not limited.
You could say extensions, you could say unlimited's a good word.
All right, I'll be happy to make the motion with that one change, and I'll change it on the
So which word are we using?
unlimited.
Unlimited?
I'd still second that.
Any other further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes.
All right.
Thank you for working on that.
No problem.
call Roger tomorrow.
Well, let me make the change first.
Well, I'll call just to let him know.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'll call him Wednesday. You have it 24 hours.
thanks.
I won't be here tomorrow. I won't be in tomorrow. That's why I'm saying that.
Thank you all for getting that taken care of. We've been working on this actually for a while. Seems like it just came up, but COVID kind of got in the middle of some of those discussions, so we finally got that done. Next is the Design Review Board ordinance revisions. I would like to start with the legal opinion. So I'm gonna ask Dirk to start us off and just sort of.
If you want, I can just run through the whole thing.
Sure.
I'll go through, but, so back in March of 2022, Nancy Cooper Green in my office issued an opinion letter indicating that in her legal opinion, an opinion that I agree with, by the way, that the Design Review Board ordinance and the Design Review Board itself was legally problematic. And there were really three major reasons for that. One was the authority to have a Design Review Board. MCL 125.3201 talks about zoning ordinances and regulating land via zoning ordinances, and also requires that any regulation of land's got to be uniform across all classes. And the problem with the current Design Review Board ordinance, Chapter 153, as well as the Design Review Board, is it isn't based on the zoning ordinance, it's based on a separate ordinance, the Design Review Board ordinance, although some portions of it were in the zoning ordinance, but primarily it's based on Chapter 153. But even more importantly, the requirements that the Design Review Board was enforcing, or had been enforcing over the years, they were not uniform, they were subjective in nature, so it's difficult for people that were coming before the city asking for the various requests that ordinance authorized to know whether, to have notice of what the standards were because of the subjective nature. Nancy also indicated, and again I agree with her, that there's substantive due process issues, and that really basically comes down to the Design Review Board ordinance and the other ordinances that the Design Review Board enforced. Again, lacked objective standards. Primarily, they were subjective in nature, leading to almost an unfettered or unlimited amount of discretion in the Design Review Board. And finally, there's a procedural due process issue, which is not based on the content so much, but based on, again, the nature of the hearings that property owners had to come to make requests of the Design Review Board because they didn't know exactly what it was that was expected of them because of the subjective nature. So as a result of that, it was suggested in that opinion letter that the village consider abolishing the Design Review Board and pushing some of those requirements that currently exist in the Design Review Board ordinance into other ordinances, as well as trying to make things more objective so that every property owner in the village understood exactly what they needed to get approval from, and there was less of a less discretion and more, yes, these are the standards, I know I've got to meet these standards. So on August 22nd, 2022, the Bingham Farms Village Council voted by a 4-3 vote to approve our office proceeding with repealing the Design Review Board ordinance and figuring out a way to make the amendments and keeping as much as we could, but putting them in other bodies' authority. And then on October 24th of 2022, the Bingham Farms Village Council adopted a moratorium, basically staying or providing that the Design Review Board could take no more action, having the village manager's office be that for the time being until an ordinance could be drafted addressing those concerns and ultimately abolishing the Design Review Board. What you have before you tonight are 3 separate ordinance amendments. The first one is an ordinance simply repealing Chapter 153 and thereby abolishing not only all the requirements of that ordinance, but also abolishing the Design Review Board. That's ordinance number 1. Because that is not a zoning ordinance amendment, that ordinance needs 2 readings. both before the village council. Tonight is the first reading. It will have to come back to the village council for a final and second reading. Tonight is just the first reading. The second ordinance is an amendment to chapter 98, which is your sign ordinance. There are numerous provisions in chapter 98 that refer to the design review board in the context of signs. That ordinance, proposed ordinance amendment, again, is not a zoning ordinance amendment. In that ordinance amendment, what I've basically done is eliminate the reference to the design review board, and most of the things the design review board were looking at have been reassigned to the planning commission. Under that ordinance amendment, like the first one, this is also 2 readings before the village council. The third amendment is the more complicated amendment, and that's a zoning ordinance amendment. And in the zoning ordinance, in the zoning ordinance amendment, 2 things are basically occurring. One is we're eliminating all the references to the design review board, and there are, I think, 18 of them, as I recall. But the second and probably more important amendment is that section 3.16 of the zoning ordinance used to be called residential design standards. And they were requirements that all folks that are building a new house in Bingham Farms had to meet. And a number of those were the subjective standards that the design review board is responsible for enforcing and considering. So what I've done is, because there were a lot of good things in that section, it's just that they needed to be more guidelines and less requirements. So 3.16, I basically, in the zoning ordinance amendment, divided it into 2 pieces, 2 separate ordinances. There's 3.16, which keeps all the objective standards that were contained in that previous section. And so there's still requirements that every property owner has to meet in order to construct a new home in the village. And I've created a new chapter 3.165, which are suggested guidelines that we're encouraging every property owner that wants to build a house in Bingham Farms to follow. So section 3.165, I retained in their entirety all of the language that Bingham Farms had in the previous section, because there's no need for me to reinvent the wheel when you had already come up with, some pretty excellent standards, subjective as they may be. But now somebody coming into the village knows, all right, 3.16, these are the things I have to do to build a new home. 3.16, these are the things that the village would like me to do when I build a new home, to be a good neighbor or a new property owner in the village of Bingham Farms. That zoning ordinance amendment is, as I said, a zoning ordinance amendment. So what that means is it has to go before the planning commission for a public hearing and then a recommendation back to the village council, and then we'll come back to the village council for 2 separate readings. So with respect to the ordinance repealing chapter 153 and the ordinance amending chapter 98 signs, is on first reading now, so no action has to be taken. It'll be on for a second reading somewhere along the line, and I'll leave it up to Ken to figure out when that is. With respect to the zoning ordinance amendment, an actual motion has to be made to refer it to the planning commission so that they can review it, make a recommendation back to the village council, and then we would proceed to have the first and second readings of that ordinance before the council. So this is just the first looking at it tonight, if you will. You will get another bite of the apple at the second reading for the first 2 ordinances, and 2 more readings for the zoning ordinance amendment.
So section 3.16.5, suggested guidelines.
Yes.
And they are not enforceable.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And so if a builder says, I want to build a very ultra-modern solid glass house on Bingham Lane, this is suggesting they don't.
It's suggesting they don't, and you hope that people coming into the village would look at that and see what the character of the area is, and it's a wonderful character, and you'd hope they follow it. But yes, to simply answer your question, if they wanted to build an ultra-modern house, they could, provided they met all the other requirements of the zoning ordinance.
The requirements, but not the suggested guidelines.
Not the suggested guidelines, right?
And it's not even a slap on the hand, it's like, well, we tried.
That's what it is, because of the subjective nature of that.
And there was no way to turn any of these into ordinances on the suggested guidelines.
In my legal opinion, no. And that's what took the longest to review this ordinance, was trying to figure out what the objective guidelines that were clearly legally enforceable were, and what the subjective guidelines were. You know, when you get into regulating aesthetics, color of homes, shapes of windows, shapes of roofs, style, architecture of home, you're in pretty deep waters there from a legal standpoint in terms of its legal enforceability. So that was the hardest part, coming up with those two separate ordinances. But having said that, I'm not presumptuous enough to substitute what I might think is right for community when those subjective standards, subjective though they may be, have been developed by this village over many, many years. You know far better, all of you, than I do, you know, what you're looking to have in your community. But having said that, from a legal standpoint, there's only so much that you can require. There's plenty, and I kept it 100% intact, plenty you can do, you know, on a suggested guideline basis.
I live in an HOA, and we have, this is the color that you will paint. This is the only kind of roof that you are allowed. And
those are still enforceable. So.
Yeah.
And had you considered the possibility of creating, with all the remaining non-HOA property, an HOA that had those kind of specific enforceable?
We, as a municipality, you can't do that. Certainly, the homeowners in whatever areas are unregulated currently by HOAs, they can certainly create one on their own, but we can't. We can't foist that
We actually
upon them.
explored that. Yeah, because we are, when you mentioned Bingham Lane, that is an HOA.
Right.
We are an HOA. Bingham Lane, every house, there are 32 homes that are part of that HOA. And what we learned this year, which is amazing, is that we have a permanent injunction on dividing any properties.
You do.
We went through the Woods property and dividing that, and the property, Klaus property, dividing that up. And when we hired an attorney to investigate it, he found the permanent injunction.
And those are still completely enforceable. So no matter what you do here tonight, those remain intact. They're not impacted by this at all. They're still enforceable. So you can do that stuff privately. You just can't do that stuff. Oops, that's a municipality.
That's all. I'm sorry to laugh. When I remember presenting projects, construction projects for my home to the DRB, and they said, well, no more columns. We don't want any more columns at the front of the house. I said, well, I was going to put my address on a light, so emergency vehicles. No, we already have too many. Like, there was no rule. But I sat there and went, oh, okay. Because I'm trying to, you know, get along. But I do understand, I take a very, almost middle of the road. I'm torn because everybody has a vision. And we have a new home going up on Bingham Lane. And we have setbacks, height requirements, the percentage of lot that can be hard surfaced. I think it's 22%. But the lot's 5 acres. So that's probably not going to be a problem. But, you know, it's important that when a homeowner buys property, they can build their dream home. I understand that. But when you mention all glass, it's like, well, it's not my vision, but I don't know.
So, okay, so the procedure then, if this is approved,
Yes.
the onus is on who to be approached with the plans for a new house?
Well, I assume the property owner and the builder would come in and file plans with the village, and I don't know whether I think the village then assigns the plans probably to Giffords to look at.
There are three steps to this. Building plans are reviewed by the Southfield Building Department
For construction only, engineering.
For building code stuff.
for building.
Codes.
The plot plan is reviewed by the engineering consultants. And until that is, I have this all written down, I can forward it to you. And then the plans are submitted to the planning consultant for zoning compliance. And until all three of those entities give their approval, building cannot proceed.
Okay, but these all are looking at ordinances only, from what you just said.
Well,
you-
The Southfield
they do
engineering
look at the ordinances, that's for certain.
and
in
the
Michigan
plot
Building Code.
plans and the planning consultants,
Mhm.
their job is to see if there's conformity to the written laws.
That's correct.
So no one is charged with looking at the guidelines.
No, that's something the village cannot do.
Well, the
No, we can't.
suggested guidelines are just guidelines, but the requirements we kept in section 3.16, those will be something that Giffords will look at.
That's no longer a guideline, that's a requirement.
Correct, that's right.
3.16,
Yeah.
but 3.165 is literally something to put on a bookshelf.
That's correct. And you hope, it's, the best example I can give is the city of Bloomfield Hills requires signs to be black and gold.
I'm
And
sorry, what was that?
the city of Bloomfield Hills requires signs to be black and gold.
Black and gold.
Black and gold.
Yeah.
So if you're a new business moving into Bloomfield Hills, you're expected to put black and gold signs up. And you'd be surprised how many people have no issues with it, because they want to be part of that community, just like people are gonna wanna be part of this community because of, what a great place it is, and because of the character of the neighborhoods that have built up over the years. So while you're right, somebody could just put it on a bookshelf, I think you're gonna be surprised that a lot of people will in fact pay attention to those, because they wanna fit in to the nature and the character of the community as
But
it
who-
exists.
In this chain of 3 reviews will say, hey, have you looked at these who's going to draw the attention to these suggested guidelines?
That's something I would do.
But I didn't hear you give your name in this.
Well, I don't do approvals.
See,
for
there's
these
no
things.
oversight. There's no,
I wouldn't agree with that.
yeah, well,
People
that's
come in,
fine.
they come in to the office, and a builder comes in similarly with a client, and we sit down and we talk about all this stuff, and I point all this stuff out to them. And they have to submit, and they have to pay dollars for all of also to cover the cost of all of these approval processes.
I thought we voted that down. It used to be $100
No,
when they submitted
it's
it
$5,000 escrow.
for the building.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
for review.
we charge off of that escrow for all of these services, the planning and the engineering. Southfield has its own fee structure that we're not a part of, but the builder, the developer, whomever it might be, would also pay them a certain amount of dollars.
Was that the same process as prior?
We did not have zoning compliance. I added that. Zoning compliance review.
So, but the engineers looked at it,
Mm-hmm.
and Southfield always does, but they don't check any ordinances. They're just looking at construction to make sure you're using the right I-beams and rafters and all that other stuff. So,
They
but,
would apply the Michigan Building Code.
right.
Yes.
So I guess my concern is, knowing that we've already had a resident that sought nothing, provided nothing, built an outbuilding on a property line. So half of it was actually on his neighbor's yard. And then when he was informed, after we called, he removed that, built another one 25 feet from the line, but it was too tall. So we went back and told him, and he had to shear down the top portion of that. I'm just concerned that that's not your focus. I mean, we're so busy that we now have a full-time assistant. So I'm thinking that if we've already taken out the liability issues, why not have don't even call it design review. call it something else, where we actually get residents whose reviews, suggestions, actually taking a welcome package to whoever is building, if it's not a spec home, and actually pay attention to that, because that's what we did. That's what I still do in our Bingham Road Homeowners Estates Association HOA, is we still have that activity. It engages people. It makes people feel welcome, that there's a group that's doing that.
I mean, my response to that would be that's just creating another level of bureaucracy you really don't need, because the same person you described that built these outbuildings without permission, that happens all the time everywhere. That's just not endemic to Bingham Farms. That happens all over. I represent a number of communities, and I'm constantly hearing about those things and having to file lawsuits and whatever. But, I mean, you can do the same thing internally. When somebody wants to build a house, you can take those suggested guidelines and actually give them to them and say, here's what we'd like to see. And those guidelines are based on the history of the city and the history of the village and how the village is developed.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that having another body, if you will, where people have to actually meet, can't be accomplished more streamlined internally by having a document.
If I may, if I read this properly, that the design and review board, or not design, I'm sorry, the planning commission also has a say in this. If I read this properly, that it still goes to the PC, the planning commission, to oversee what's going on, and
for
they would then
for some of the stuff, mostly the signs.
That's more, okay. Because what I would suggest is, because the board has decided in the past to abolish the design and review board, there we go. But we haven't placed anything, either idea or some kind of essence of DRB contribution, kind of what you guys are talking about. And I would suggest that we seriously think about adding 2 more members to the planning commission that would have design and architectural background to kind of oversee some of this, and or we've got suggestions, they then could make suggestions that would be backed up by their expertise. Something for this board to think about, since it does go to design, at least that's the way I read it, that the, again, the planning commission goes and looks at a number of these things.
The planning commission would not be looking at construction of new homes. The planning commission would be dealing with requirements for the sign ordinance that the DRB used to deal with. It's very unusual to require, at least again, communities that I'm familiar with, Bloomfield Hills, Bloomfield Township, Auburn Hills, a few others. It's very unusual to have the planning commission looking at single-family residential construction. There are certain occasions if somebody wants to build a home that doesn't quite meet the zoning ordinance requirements, then oftentimes they can go to the planning commission for waivers. But just as a general rule, to have single-family residential homes in the building of those looked at by the planning commission, that's really pretty unusual.
Yeah, but we've gone from a voluntary group that will take direction, because I explained to them that we cannot force people to do things. No 2-story entrances, and it was so ambiguous. It was, there are 8, pick 5. It's just, I disagreed with that theory, that was our role. But at the same time, we've gone from a voluntary group of just simply oversight and suggestion to now paying an attorney to review, because this says that this is going to go to our, no?
Not true.
No.
Well,
They're paying, it's in, the person submitting the plan is paying for all the review. The people
Right.
submitting the plan.
No, but the idea is we still are giving money to the attorney. We're giving money to our
Just to draft this
professional.
ordinance. I mean, if this ordinance gets adopted, I will have no input at all into building plans for homes. None whatsoever.
So I read, it says that,
I think in the resolution that was adopted back in October of '22,
yeah,
while we were in the process of abolishing the design review board, certain things were referred to Ken and were referred to Giffords and referred to me in the meantime. but once this ordinance is adopted, we'll have, and frankly, I still don't have any input in reviewing residential construction. And when this ordinance is adopted, if it does get adopted, the same will be true. I'll have no input at all.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question of Ken.
Yes?
There's an architect sitting in an office right now drawing up plans for a lot on Bingham Lane, most likely. Does that architect have a copy of this suggested guideline
There,
at this
it's in
moment?
process. I didn't have that until this last week. So it doesn't have what you're holding in your hands. But I have met with that person,
Uh-huh.
and I have talked with that person, and I have shown that person our zoning ordinance. And we have had numerous conversations
But-
with the architect.
But the
And
zoning
I-
ordinance is far different than section 16.5.
That's 16.3.16.5 is in the zoning ordinance right now, under
Yes.
a different number.
It's under 3.16.
Okay. All right, it's there.
Just separated the
Mhm.
subjective and the objective.
Right. So it's there, and that architect is aware of it.
Okay. How about a process where we ask them to ascertain that they have reviewed and understand the ordinance? In other words, a sign-off that they've read the rules.
Nothing wrong. There's
Nothing wrong with that?
It just would eliminate any errors in construction prior to them being there.
I mean, that doesn't need to be in an ordinance. That's just something you can do internally, just require.
Like this fellow who-
Before a building permit is issued, that there has to be an acknowledgement that they've read the ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's
I
nothing.
mean, and that takes the onus off of us.
Sure.
Like, well, you've got to tear that down. You said that you read the rules. This is the rule. So we
Yeah,
could
it-
enforce things a lot more easily and maybe with a lot more monetary damage when they break the rule. I mean, a $500 fee is nothing in this day and age. A $10,000 fee will get somebody's attention.
You know, one of the things you can do, and it's done in a lot of different communities, oftentimes in the context of either a ZBA application or a planning commission application, but you could do it for a building permit application too, is just have an acknowledgement saying, you know, that I hereby acknowledge that I'm familiar with the rules and I've read the zoning ordinance requirements that are applicable to building a brand new house. So I mean, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Is there a way that we could make a motion to have something like that included, or is it just an administrative
I
kind of
don't
thing?
think we need to make a motion.
We don't need a
for
motion on that, just,
We would just,
this is first reading, so we're changing things.
Right, this is just first reading anyway, so you've got to wait. You're going to see this again, you know, in a more final, not more final form, but for you to make a final decision. Tonight's not that time. Tonight's just here it is for the first time, you know, and let's talk about it.
But that change wouldn't need to go in the ordinance anyway. That could be a procedural change that you
Does not
can't make.
need to go in the ordinance.
application.
It could be a procedural change, right?
The application could just have that statement on, someone initials it, and
Exactly.
Yeah.
and I think the builders would always go to that anyway to start, and that's why we chose, well, if they're looking to build a home, that's the first place some of them will go, so they know what they're dealing with. And then that's why we had the discussion to put those suggested things right in the ordinance, is because a builder previous had said, you know, it would be easier for the builders to see it if it was all right there.
It's a
So-
fair and realistic expectation that a builder building in Bingham Farms, or any municipality for that matter, should be familiar with what the rules are. And if they're not, they should be. And one of the ways you can at least require them to do it is to sign something saying, I've reviewed the rules with respect to residential construction in the village of Bingham Farms, and I understand.
Now, would it also be appropriate to put in there that they also contact the appropriate HOAs? Because,
No, HOAs are different tracks. They're parallel. They're equally enforceable, but they're enforceable by different people, or different entities is maybe a better way of saying it. So no, we can't get involved with enforcing HOA
because
regulations.
the village has one set of setbacks, HOAs maybe have a different set of setbacks.
I mean, it's okay to put something in that statement saying you may want to check with your HOA to see if there are additional requirements, but that's about as strong as you can make it.
I think that would be
How
apropos.
does your HOA get your information to Ken, who talks with the guy who's drawing the plans.
He doesn't.
You know,
That's, there's,
There's no
as Dirk was saying,
communication.
there are two different avenues, but they run parallel.
Right.
So it's up to the HOA, hopefully, somebody that's gonna come in will then present the plans to the HOA board.
But they
And
don't
they-
even know that it
Well,
exists.
let's give me some credit here. There have been two houses, a house that's being built on Bingham Lane and a house that will be built on Bingham Lane. I have instructed both parties about
Yeah.
your HOA.
Right.
And that they need to discuss or meet with,
Yeah.
and I provided the president's phone number to those parties,
Yeah.
and I know that they've had discussions. And I believe, at least in the one case, that the house that's nearly built,
Has complied.
yes, and the second one, I can only assume they are going to,
Yeah.
but I don't know that for a fact.
It's on the deed restrictions. Anyone buying a lot knows that there's an HOA. I mean, whether they know the rules of the HOA, I don't know,
Yeah.
but like, I've looked at properties in that area. It's, the first thing the realtor told me was, you realize this is in an HOA. Here's the rules.
Here's the rule, okay.
So but I think Ken telling them is
Yeah,
not a,
it's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, as proposed I think it was a good split between, subjective and not, and, I think a couple members have mentioned that they would be, having the plans come up in front of a group of people, whether it's the planning commission or not. I'm absolutely against that. Having been someone who went through the process, I would consider it anything but welcoming to the village, the process we had. So I would be, I think this is the right process to follow. I think we should make suggestions. They should be in writing. I would be against any sort of group of residents suggesting to incoming people, the houses, having some discussion around that. I just don't think it's appropriate.
For the HOA on Bingham Lane, we get sets of plans. So what we do is, we get a plot plan survey and the house building construction plans. And we can see that the setbacks are there and measure the roof lines. And that's really that's what we do, just to confirm that they're meeting the guidelines, well, not guidelines, the ordinances and code for the HOA. But we used to go into material, because the charter actually includes building materials. But I pointed out, I said, that was written in like 1925. We didn't have all the materials that they have today. So that's really not a relevant criteria either. So, yeah, we really don't do a lot of subjective for our HOA.
Well, I guess I just wanted to, emphasize again that the current ordinances that we have areas that 3 separate attorneys from, our village attorney's office have told us that the provisions, the way they're written, are not enforceable. And I just don't think we should be doing things that are not enforceable, that are not within the scope of our authority. And it seems to me that we need to change these as proposed, and the way to address the concerns that a lot of people have are through the HOAs or the condo associations, because there it is enforceable, and so if you want to do that kind of stuff, do it through the HOAs or through the condo associations. Don't do it through the village when we have 3 separate attorneys from Dirk's firm telling us we can't do it.
How many HOAs do we have within the village?
4.
I believe 5.
5, Woodland, yeah. 5.
And so everything else, which is where the empty lots are,
There aren't many of those left.
No,
no, the one,
maybe 3, yeah.
I'm not even sure that's right. But, yeah, there aren't many of those left. That might come into a greater play when someone buys a house and demos it and builds on that spot.
Yeah.
More so than lots that have never been developed before.
So what we are saying is that enforceable things are like building height, setbacks, and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and that's all part of the
And
zoning
that's all,
compliance
yeah.
review.
So really, all that needs to happen tonight, you've already had the first reading on the chapter 153 repealing the sign portion of it. You just need a motion to refer the zoning ordinance amendments to the planning commission for their review to make recommendation to come back to you, and then you'll have another bite of the apple, so.
At the bottom of the memo that I provided to you, there is a suggested motion for that instruction.
I just want to make sure before we get to a motion that all questions and concerns on this are addressed right now. Because we've gone around and around with this for quite some time. We have our attorney here. So if people are going to have concerns or give opposing information out in the public, I would like it to be cleared up right now.
I would, if there are residents that want to have input into the design suggestions, I missed the number.
3.16.5.
Yeah. The place for them to do that would be at the planning, or at the planning commission meeting where this is discussed.
Because they will hold a public,
Right.
there's a public hearing required to be held at the planning commission.
So I think that's useful to make sure residents know, because I've read this, I knew the old rule, I read how you split it, I think it's well, but if there are views that people would want more suggestions in there, or different suggestions, I think that's probably the most appropriate time
Agreed.
to do.
That's the idea behind the public hearing.
So I would encourage residents that are concerned about this topic to attend that meeting and voice those suggestions.
And since this is a first reading, and we are a HOA that abuts a property that is about to be developed, and there's quite a few homes that abut it, I would like to be able to share this first reading material with them. So to say that everything needs to come forward now, I really, between the first reading and the second reading, I do want the option of any resident input being added.
That's all public record now.
For
so-
sure.
So you can absolutely share that
Yes.
with.
I'm just talking about with council. I've heard, I've had multiple conversations with some council people who have said some
No,
other
but if somebody
things.
says, I can't be at the meeting, Diane, but would you take my point, So I'm
No,
going to-
absolutely. That's why we do a first and second reading. I'm really talking about council people right now. That if you have something to say, please say it now.
Well,
basically.
We'll try.
No
Can I-
comment? I've always my
I
opinion.
do have one other question. Is oversight with the elevation of a property, when a home is destroyed, a tear down, like in Bill's lot now, there's a lot of earth around there.
Mm.
And you wonder, does the plan that was submitted, that will be submitted, do you ask them for a plan of what they're going to do with that? So that, like, I flooded my neighbor's yard one day with the runoff from a line that they were putting in. So with Bill's lot, we've got the Outlands behind, and we've got McAlexander's on one side and the Margolis is on the other. Who is responsible for making sure that the elevation of the property is, and taking into consideration these homes and the runoff, that they're protected?
The plot plan is reviewed by the engineer,
Your engineer.
and there's all kinds of engineering standards that are requirements that must be met. Once the house is built, there are what's called as-built plans that are
Right.
submitted that have to be reviewed also.
Yeah.
And if there's an error or a change that was unauthorized, it has to be corrected.
Right.
And we would hope that we would get to the point where a house isn't 3 feet taller than what it's supposed to be for, a massive issue like that would be, I'm not sure how to handle that, but most of the changes between an as-built and a plot plan, I would say, are relatively fixable.
In one of the engineering requirements, it's almost universal, is that stormwater runoff stay on your own property and/or be outletted to a recognized
Right.
outlet so that it doesn't impact adjacent neighbors with respect to flooding and the like. So.
Yeah. Good.
If there aren't any other comments from anybody else, I would move to instruct the Village of Bingham Farms Planning Commission to hold a public hearing and make recommendations to council regarding the village attorney's proposed changes to the zoning ordinance.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work on this also.
Oh, you're welcome.
It was just a huge lift.
It was interesting to watch.
Right, so, I appreciate all of the effort. I know it was a lot. We are going to move on to C, which is the woodland ordinance. I had said in a previous meeting a couple months ago that we were gathering information and would address our tree ordinance at the February meeting. So that's what we're doing. I would like to have discussion about the tree ordinance and see if we can kind of move on some of this stuff. I don't know if everybody has it, but the Bristol Lane Tree Incident Petition that was submitted on September of 2023, each bullet point that was kind of suggested to us to enforce was sent to our attorney to see if those were enforceable or not. And so I don't know how we exactly want to go through this, but again, this is something I want to clear up tonight. If somebody has something to say, I would like to hear it tonight. I don't know if everybody has a copy of this, but I don't know if we want to go through it point by point or how anybody wants to start the discussion, but I think we need to hash this out, and if we're going to firm up this ordinance or tighten it up, I think tonight is a good time to start that. So we're addressing the petition that came before council.
I walked along some property and many trees had a tag and a separate number on them. Is that uniform throughout the village with regulated trees, or where did these numbers and tags?
Are they metal?
Yes.
That's usually a builder. Those are on my property. So when the builder is going through the process, they normally tag a lot of the regulated trees. And like my builder actually identified the species of each tree. And I think it's just an easier way to keep track of the 20% as well as making sure that everybody on property knows which
that's a
trees are coming
regulated
down
tree.
and which trees are not coming down.
Yeah, Lisa?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's actually the surveying engineer that does that, not the builder.
Well, my
And,
builder had it done.
yeah, they, well, he probably hired the guy to come and, they survey the entire property, put the stakes, the front and the back, the property lines. They identify each tree and then give you a list. And so you know, tree number whatever is an ash or a maple or an elm or whatever. So it lets you know.
So the builder has it done as part of the building process.
Well, I had mine done even without the building process, because I wanted to know where the property lines were.
In the incident that you're referring to, and the suggestions that were made, were any of those trees tagged or marked in
Which
any way?
incident are you talking about? I didn't mention the incident.
Well, no, there was some clearing that was done in preparation for a lot to be built on. Was it Old Stage or Stagecoach?
I'm not sure which property
Well,
you're.
there's a property on Old Stage that is being built right now, and there was a tree survey done on that property prior to the construction. Is that what you're referring to? Mr. Friedman came and spoke.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's the property, yeah, that company submitted the tree survey well in advance of clearing that spot for that house. They're well under the 20% mark that we require a landscaping plan for. Nevertheless, they're submitting a landscaping plan also.
Okay, so they were marked before they were, the other ones were removed.
Yes, that's
So they were
correct.
preserved.
Right,
The regulated trees were preserved
yes.
on that property, okay.
Right, well, the ones that were, there's, I don't want to confuse the term here. You're allowed to remove some regulated trees, okay? So that's where the threshold is. So they removed some to build the house, but the majority of them remain intact around the footprint of the
Perimeter.
home, yes.
Okay.
What chapter is this, just out of, is it 153?
It's 93.
93.01.
Lisa, I don't remember the petition offhand. How long is it? I don't know if it makes sense to go through one by one. Is that a
This one?
10-minute exercise or a 2-hour?
The suggested?
Yeah,
I can go through them one by one.
yeah. I think maybe to address those residents' concerns, it might be helpful to do that and then understand what the legal precedent might be as far as whether, can be added to the regulation or not.
Was that part of the packet? Because,
It's not.
No,
No.
oh,
sorry.
because I don't have that with me.
I have copies here.
Can I get a copy, please?
Yeah, I don't,
I think we all would like to see it.
And I just want to back up. You can remove regulated trees, right?
Okay.
Okay, so as long as they're under 20% to clear a spot for a home,
Would you pass this down?
they have to be 20% or less. I believe the property you're speaking about was at
Take one and pass it around.
approximately 16.5 they cleared.
The
I
attorney's,
know they were under.
the attorney's comments are highlighted in yellow.
Right, okay.
it's a single page, correct?
It's, well, double-sided, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is there, if there's an extra one over there, you can grab it. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry about that. That's all good.
So the suggestions that came from the public, which was a lot, mostly rooted from DRB discussions of the past, starts with the requirement of a professional survey and landscaping plan for new construction and landscaping jobs. You can see, if you look at your highlighted copy, that is problematic, legally problematic. Dirk, I don't know if you want to speak to that. I know you weren't prepared to speak to it, so you don't have to, but,
Yeah, I didn't know
yeah.
that this was gonna be on tonight's agenda, so.
Right.
When I saw woodlands ordinance, I assumed we were gonna talk about this woodlands protection. So,
I think typically in the past, anything that came before the DRB, that trees that need to be removed for putting in a house, I think we suggested that that was fine, no problem there, that try to keep within 6 or 8 feet of the house if that was possible. Other than that, removing any tree that would, obviously, if they had 20 trees where you're going to put the house, well, you're going to have to remove the trees. So we really didn't worry about that. It was more of the outlying trees that the DRB was worried about.
Well, they can remove up to 20% of any trees that they want. They
Yeah.
could decide which trees needed to be removed and which trees could be kept for building of the house. We can't tell them, remove this tree and that tree and this tree and not those 2 trees.
Right.
This is requiring the survey and the landscaping plan, which means it has to come before planning commission or something for approval. Well, if you want to just change your garden plot, where does it stop?
Right, that's one of the concerns.
yeah, that is one of the concerns. And
Right.
certainly a regulated tree is defined in the ordinance, and that can be regulated, but just
Right.
going beyond that kind of bleeds into what the DRB was doing with respect to aesthetics in the home. It's kind of the same sort of thing.
Right, so that one would not work. number one is not feasible. Requiring a village forum review and / approval, including public transparency and resident input. And that's also legally problematic. I mean, that's basically what the design review board was doing. You know, you can't really have public input on people's landscaping. So that's also a problem. Adopting a 1-to-1 tree replacement for all regulated trees.
Let me take a stab at
Okay,
that, 'cause
good.
there's a lot of words there.
Thank you.
I think I can break it down. That one I'm terribly familiar with. There was a recent federal court case, Federal Court of Appeals case called FP Development versus Canton Township. Canton Township had an ordinance basically saying if you removed certain trees, you had to replace them on a 1-to-1 basis or pay a certain amount of money into a tree fund. And the court said, well, you can't just do that. There's got to be some relationship to the replacement requirements you have with respect to the particular property. So what the court basically said was, and I'm paraphrasing, but the court basically said, before you utilize a 1-to-1 replacement ratio, or I'm sorry, replacement requirement, you have to look at each individual property to see whether it's reasonable. So for instance, if you were building a $400,000 house and that required removal of some trees, and replacing the trees was gonna cost $400,000, either paying it into a fund or to replace on a 1-to-1 basis, the court said that's unreasonable. So you have to look at every individual property or development to see whether a 1-to-1 replacement requirement would be appropriate and reasonable financially based on the development going on. So the long and the short of it is, a 1-on-1 replacement for all regulated trees is gonna be problematic legally due to that federal court opinion in FP Development versus Canton.
So another no.
Another no. The adopting the 10% versus 20%, that is something that is feasible, so I just want to skip that for a second and come back to that discussion. Adopting a 6-foot rule protecting regulated trees near new home construction. You can see, you know, that's, we're not really clear on what that means. DEU just referred to it.
Right, that
I
was one of the
think
things that we
again-
did look at, yeah.
I mean, when you're building a new house, there's like an overdig. So if your basement's here, you're gonna dig to here.
Right.
Right?
And that was one of the things in consideration.
Right, so, I mean, a 6-foot rule, you know, I mean, it's just not feasible to build a house with
Yep.
not taking down a tree that's 6 feet away from the wall. I mean, you need construction room and you know, the tree's more than likely gonna die anyway. The branches would be hitting the house.
Right. Depending on the size of the tree, too. If it was an older tree and you dug down, you're going to lose half the roots anyway, so the tree would not survive.
Right.
It was one of the things that we looked at.
Right, so I feel that one is not feasible. Shielding the mechanicals, I'm gonna come back to that one as well. Let's move to establishing the non-tree vegetation removal guidelines requiring a village forum approval. Again, we don't regulate non-tree vegetation. I'm not even sure what that is, maybe bushes or buckthorn or some sort of low-growing vegetation. That's not something we regulate. And again, that village forum word, open the door, Joe, thank you, or somebody, thank you. That word village forum again is a problem because you're asking somebody to, right, it's too subjective. So that's not feasible. Placing the homes to preserve the tree canopy. You can read again, this is potentially legally problematic. I mean, we have setbacks and all that sort of thing. So a lot of times, you know, there's a lot goes into the placement of a house. And so again, I'm not sure how you would require somebody with all the setbacks and that to place a house in a certain spot in order to preserve the tree canopy.
But here we go to, we could encourage, similar to suggestions we have for building house.
Right. And I think a lot of, you know, builders do that anyway. I mean, they don't want to have to pay to have trees taken down and replant trees, so it could be a suggestion, but that's not something that's enforceable. And then revise the designation of heritage trees from requiring nomination supported by the Planning Commission to automatic designation, is in the case of Franklin. I believe Franklin does that. I mean, they have a lot more history than we do, and a lot more public land than we do. Parks, the police department, church, owned by Franklin. We don't really have that, so.
Can we declare a heritage tree if the homeowner wants to on a particular property?
Could you speak to that?
Currently, it's what's written in our ordinance, which is attached to part of your packet.
I think we could, yeah.
It's voluntary.
Okay.
And if someone wanted to, the program has never been implemented. It's a task assigned to the Planning Commission. I'm unclear why it's never been implemented, but it never has been.
No one's ever asked for it, so.
Okay. So as it stands right now, if we
haven't actively
were
looked
to
for it
do
either,
it,
but
it would
yeah.
still be voluntary.
Yeah.
Or it would not be mandatory.
Now, if it does become a heritage tree, then what are the regulations, or what pertains to a heritage tree versus a non-heritage tree?
Right? I don't know what Franklin's ordinance suggests.
Dirk, would you know?
I wouldn't know, but communities do have different names, landmark trees, heritage trees, kind of the same concept. And you can have increased requirements for those kind of trees. But I don't know what Franklin has.
Okay. I guess my question is, if it's declared one and a homeowner asks it be declared as one, does it become a protected tree? Is that the case?
Generally, it becomes a protected tree, and there's limitations on how much you can cut down. There's limitations if you do cut it down. There's more stringent replacement requirements generally.
Okay. Which we don't have, that I know of.
So the homeowner would have to be willing to sort of,
Right now, the
Take that on.
homeowner would have to apply for that, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that a lot would go into that, because if the homeowner decided to do something or not do something with that tree, and it was declared a heritage tree, then who would enforce? Let's say the tree got sick, and the Planning Commission wanted them to do certain things to try to save that tree. That would be at the cost to the homeowner.
Yeah,
Who makes a decision on that?
that's my question.
Right. So I think it's a
Yeah.
very, it sounds nice in theory, but I think it's a really
Yeah, that's why I
complicated
was asking if
situation.
Dirk knew,
Right,
I like the idea, however,
right.
what does it mean? Yeah.
Right, if it's on public property, if it's on property that the village owns, we don't own property.
We don't own property, so
Right?
yeah.
So if you live in a community that owns property and there's a heritage tree on that property, it's a much easier situation to deal with if
Yeah.
something goes wrong with that
And
tree.
it's up to that municipality to take care of it, yeah.
Right, but if it's on private property, it gets really complicated.
Yeah.
So I would say, you know,
Kind of leave it
that's
the way it
kind
is.
of a
and,
non-starter
Yeah.
right now. Okay, so I would like to jump back up to the adopt 10% versus 20% tree removal. I can speak kind of personally to this. This is something that came before council multiple times and bounced back and forth from DRB to council. The question was always, why 10%? Like, just justify the 10%? How do we get to 10%? Why not 5% or 15% or 18%? And there was never really a resolution to that. So, I mean, that is something that we could do. We do need to make sure that properties are buildable. We can't create a situation where a property is not a buildable piece of property. So that's something that is open for discussion. Yes.
Remind me so that's the requirement to come get a permit, right? Is the 20%, or that's the limit of?
Let me just find it in the ordinance.
Just
I'll read
to-
exactly
just
what
to
it
make
says here.
It's 93.04B,
Okay.
I believe, no,
No tree permit may be approved or issued for activity that will or may cause result in the removal of more than 20% of the regulated trees on a site, unless a tree replacement plan conforming to the requirements of 93.09 is submitted and approved by the village. So that is the threshold, basically for submitting a tree replacement plan. If you're at 19%,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have to worry about that. If you're at 20 or 21 or whatever higher, you would have to submit a tree replacement plan conforming to what's in 9309.
And I didn't pull that up. He summarized 93.9.
9309, if the village administrator determines that a tree removal permit meets all the standards of 06 and 08, and that a justification for removal of regulated trees in excess of the standards above has been established, then tree replacement would be required as a condition of the tree removal. Replacement of trees shall occur on the site or on the property permanently reserved as open space. Removal of trees must be in accordance with the tree woodlands management plan, tree woodlands management plan. C, all replacement trees shall have a 2.5-inch diameter breast height or greater. Tree replacement shall be at the following ratio, and there's a little graph here. All replacement trees shall satisfy the American Association of Nurseryman standards. The location and replacement of the trees shall be subject to the approval of the village administrator and shall provide the optimum enhancement, preservation, and protection of woodland areas.
I also want to read, because it sort of bounces off what Dee said, the preservation and conservation of trees, woodlands, associated vegetation, related wildlife, and other natural resources shall have priority over development when there are feasible and prudent location alternatives on the site for proposed buildings, structures, or other improvements.
Yeah.
So it's pretty thorough.
Now, something I could think of, if we decide to adopt, let's say, 10% tree removal threshold, then I would suggest maybe that would not include what you had to remove to put a house in. Again, I go back to what we did on planning commission. If you had to remove trees where the house was going, we didn't worry about that. It was everything else that we worried about.
So you're
So you
allowing for some building envelopes removal?
Correct, yeah.
Beyond that, okay.
Right, yeah,
It's
it was,
actually
yeah.
interesting. That would make the 10% a lot more palatable.
Yes.
When,
I agree.
yeah, you would just.
I mean, you're gonna put a house in there, the house is, you gotta take the trees out.
You write it to say excluding 10% the threshold excluding the building envelope.
Correct.
Which would be
Whatever the building,
footprint plus some.
plus some, yeah.
So if a lot is very heavily wooded on the street half,
Or even,
Facing the
or
street.
if it wasn't heavily wooded and you took out 20%, let's say they got 10 trees there, you have to take out 5 of them, that's 50%. So that would not, obviously, that would be illegal right now.
No, it wouldn't. I just want to clarify. The 20%, the 10%, whether you change it to 10, 50, 60, it does not prevent people from being able to remove those trees. It just requires them to provide a tree replacement plan.
Correct.
None of it actually prevents people from removing
Correct.
trees.
Right.
So it wouldn't be illegal. I just want to make sure everybody's
Okay.
on the same page.
Poor choice of words, but yeah, it would require, yeah.
So basically, you could build the house anywhere on the lot, as long,
No,
as
because
long as,
you meet the setbacks.
yes, but with the envelope, could be anywhere, providing that what you take out of that envelope, where the house is going to go, if it's regulated, you gotta replace it someplace else on the property.
Whereas I'm suggesting that that would not be regulated.
The envelope has to conform to the setback.
setback,
So
right,
you-
yes.
Yeah.
in case of R1 housing, you have to be 100 feet off the road. You can't build closer than 100 feet to the road and without getting a variance. And I don't see that being granted too often. So you do have to adhere to those setback requirements, which it's 100 feet in front, it's 100 feet in the back, it's 25 feet on the side for R1. I mean, that's a lot of space for trees that would just never have to come out. Healthy, live trees would never have to be removed. Never.
But in the case of a long, narrow lot, 6 acres or whatever, you could go all the way to the back of that lot and just wind your way through the woods and put the envelope at the back end of the lot, providing you're still, because with that kind of size lot, you have plenty of room to adhere to setbacks.
Yeah, you could build all the way in the back. Of that lot that you're referring to is the one near your house?
I know,
Yeah.
I mean, who would want to do it? But I mean,
Right.
technically, because there's a very heavy concentration of very large trees towards the back part of that 6.5 acres compared to the front part of that 6.5 acres.
And that's why I'm suggesting that that would not be included in this.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Isn't that swampy back there?
It gets higher.
Okay.
You go through a swamp and then you get higher.
Okay.
But I'm just trying to figure, so what I'm saying is that the envelope of where the house will be is really movable, providing the setbacks are adhered to.
In that case,
on a
sounds
large
like it.
lot.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, right. In that
And
case,
if
it would be movable.
Yes, and if you have major, big-sized trees on that new envelope way back there, as long as you follow the tree replacement, you can do it.
Right.
And that doesn't interfere with the canopy, although the canopy would be destroyed back there.
In that spot, yes, in that envelope, and that could be sizable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, just want to understand.
Is there, because I'm not sure, I don't recall who sent the petition from Bristol Lane, but is there, does anyone know why the suggestion was to go from 20% to 10%? Was there a, other than it's, more restrictive, I mean, is 10% make, is there some other sort of argument for 10% as opposed to 20%? I mean, I'm, this is one we could do if we wanted to, I mean, this is,
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, I'm willing to at least consider this because it.
Yeah, and that's why I'd like the
you say
caveat of.
No,
Right.
this
Yeah.
is
This
one that
is-
we could actually do
Yes.
if we knew what the
But I
reason
think
was.
to do something, but it doesn't have to go from 20 to 10, it could go to 15.
Correct,
And
correct.
still, be, us being accommodating and trying to, preserve as many trees as possible, but still letting the homeowner have a shot at it. So I would go for 15.
I think I don't remember exactly, but I think there was some work done to try to benchmark this against other communities, and maybe 10 was the most restrictive that was identified. I don't know that for sure, but that was my recollection of 10, of how, maybe how 10 ended up on this paper. I don't know for sure, but I don't think we found any that were below 10 that I can remember, but perhaps
I can't recall.
about 20 might be. I'm in favor of being more restrictive, so I think that I like the 10. I think the DE, which you mentioned, is helpful
I agree.
to that. So, but in most cases, I think, there, as Ken mentioned, there are not a lot of empty lots. So you, generally, the footprint of the new house is going where the old one was,
Right.
but maybe it's bigger or whatever. So giving that potential homeowner a allowance for those trees is helpful. And still gets to what I think a lot of the residents want, which is not losing regulated trees that have nothing to do with the
Correct.
buildings.
For the building envelope, yeah, I agree, yeah.
But I think the focus has to be on regulated trees and not this other stuff that's in there.
Because as we all know, one of the reasons that a lot of people come in here is they drive down Bingham Lane or Bingham Road and go, wow, look at the trees. Especially when everything is in summertime, when it's just a gorgeous green envelope that you drive through.
The lots that could be affected by that, Aaron, would be where you have a larger lot, like 3 to 4 acres, with a 2,500 square foot home, and they're gonna come in and build a much larger, is where you start looking at that. But I agree, the envelope for building has got to be considered, so. But I would go along with the 10.
So 10% of the trees outside of the envelope.
Outside of the envelope, yes.
And that, I mean, that makes sense to me.
I like that idea.
So the building envelope does not count.
Right.
Correct,
Take down all the trees in the building envelope.
right.
And then the rest of the property would be
Yeah.
10%.
Because we really can't restrict. You gotta build a house, you gotta take the dirt out to put the house
You
in.
could, you would just think someone would have to replace them with a regulated
Correct.
tree bait
Yes.
that meets that size
Right.
requirement, which can
Which
be
can be done.
extremely
Once they're-
Yes.
expensive. Yeah.
Quick question, because my brain works with math this way.
No problem.
If you're not counting the trees within the building envelope as part of the 10%.
Correct.
What are we taking 10% of? Are you counting the trees that are getting taken down in the building envelope as part of the 100%, and then the 10% being counted off of that total amount? Or is the 10% being counted out of the total trees outside the building envelope to begin with?
The
Because
second
that
one.
could drastically change the number depending on the lot.
Yes.
I just want to...
Good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah,
I think it's
the second one, yeah. I wasn't gonna try and repeat that, but yes, the second one.
And does the envelope include the foundation wall
Oh,
plus
absolutely.
6
Yeah.
feet?
Or whatever they need to, yeah.
It would definitely
Yeah.
include the 6
Plus
feet.
6
at
feet,
least.
so the envelope is larger than the foundation
Oh,
wall?
absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
So the building envelope, Ken, just for clarity, would include the whole building, but not just the house, right? The building, like if you have bricks over 20 feet away from the house, is that still the building envelope?
No.
Bricks?
Or whatever building
Sorry.
material they're bringing to the house? Do you know what I'm saying?
You mean
Yes.
the construction site part of
Yes.
it?
Is that the building envelope, the construction site, or is it literally the house?
I actually want to clarify this terminology. We should start talking about house footprint plus 6 feet, because building envelope is literally all the space on a lot up to buildable setbacks, and you don't want to make that mistake in the
Oh,
ordinance.
good point, good point.
Because that's the buildable envelope as defined by the...
Okay.
That's what I'm asking, what is the envelope? Does that,
The envelope is take your entire lot and take all the setbacks out that you need to adhere to. That area is your building envelope. Your house footprint is what your architect actually designs your house to take
Yeah.
up on that lot.
So
So
we're-
your building envelope on a property like that could
Could be-
be, I don't know, 4 or 5 acres.
Yeah.
But your building footprint
Yeah.
will be whatever square footage your house takes
I
up.
think we're meeting footprint.
We're talking, yeah,
Yes.
footprint,
okay, so footprint plus what?
6 feet.
6 feet.
6 feet.
Yeah.
What about the deck space?
Well, that'd be part of,
I think that's
The
part of
footprint.
That's part of the footprint, because that's part of the, either impervious or whatever building surface.
And the driveway?
Well, something they're building,
yeah.
but no, that's not
I wouldn't
technically part of the
put that.
envelope, because it does extend into the setbacks.
Right.
Yeah.
The
So-
driveway, there's an exception for driveways because obviously they go beyond, they meet the road, that's where the setback is.
Yeah.
So, there's an exception for that, I'm not sure exactly how to word it though. Well, I mean, if this is a consensus of the council, we can work on this. Do you have any Dirk and I can work on doing something that would be, we come up with some language that would be palatable to you all and
Yeah.
present it next month.
Which kind of puts number 4 and number 5 kind of together.
Yeah, actually it does, you're right.
But we said no to number 5 already.
Well, before they
No.
were saying you
6 feet.
couldn't
You,
cut down trees
Within 6 feet.
within.
than
yeah.
6 feet. Anything beyond 6 feet.
We're suggesting that, yeah, you can.
Okay.
Because you still have to be able to get your construction materials, your construction, whatever you need to construct with to get into there.
Okay, so let's let that one settle. We don't have to totally tighten it up tonight. So,
No.
so we're moving in the right direction on that one. Maybe
We can come
next
up with
month,
some language.
we'll just,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
this isn't gonna be
Some
changed like
alternatives.
tomorrow, so.
Mhm.
The other one is the shield, the mechanicals and structures slash sheds with landscaping. This one, I feel like the mechanicals and structure, the mechanicals, I feel like is an easy one. I kind of can't believe that that's not already a thing. I think a lot of people do. The only hard part of that will be if we would need enforcement, because most of the time mechanicals are behind or on the side of a house. But I don't know what "and structures" means, and then sheds. I don't know. I would like some discussion on, people being required to landscape like an outbuilding.
To me, that would also take into pools and so forth, that,
Mhm.
I mean, you need a fence around a pool anyway. So, yeah, I
Right, but
agree.
we can't really
What are we
force
talking about
people.
there?
Right, it's not really clear, and I mean, again, like, we can't force people to do landscaping.
I would suggest that legally, our planners would consider a fence a structure. And if you have a fence around a pool, then you have to, if you required landscaping around the structure, you would
Right.
inquire, that could be a lot of planting around a fence, which would, I think, in the sense of fencing a pool, it's typically, I think it has to be 4 feet high.
4
which
foot high,
means
yeah.
It's a lot of growth. It doesn't seem like, there had to be an exception for that. I don't think it would be wise to landscape an entire fence.
Well, the same goes for if there's a fence around a tennis court.
Yeah? Yes, I
Yeah.
can say that. Mm-hmm.
When I read it, what in my mind is, I'm thinking air conditioners, gas, where your gas goes into your house,
Generators.
generators, mechanicals.
Right.
I don't know that stepping into requiring, like you say, somebody's landscaping around the fence of their pool, I think we're overstepping our bounds there.
What about a hockey rink?
Or a hockey rink.
Yeah.
That's a big question. No, that's a serious question.
I mean, a little
There is a
garden,
hockey rink.
Yeah.
a little, if somebody had
It's
like a
landscaped.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah.
greenhouse or something, like, again, where does it end? If
Yeah.
we say mechanicals, we can pretty easily define mechanicals.
Yeah.
Dirk, and we're okay with doing an ordinance that would say you have to landscape around mechanicals?
Yes. Yeah, most communities have that.
Do we have to,
Most communities provide that you either have to landscape around mechanicals, or you have to put up a fence or a wall around mechanicals. So yeah, you're absolutely okay with
do we have to define what the landscaping is?
that. Usually, it's words to the effect that it's gotta be tall enough so you can't see the mechanicals.
I would argue that, I don't think you could put a fence, if you put a fence here, it would not meet the current ordinance, so not allowed to have a fence.
You're only allowed to have it around pools.
Around a pool.
Yeah.
I like the idea of, we should be able to leverage another community's words on this So
Oh, yeah, we definitely
I
have.
think that would be
Yeah,
Right.
that's not gonna
a
be,
very good
mechanicals,
idea.
yeah, we can definitely.
But this only is triggered upon the construction of a new house? I mean, we're not gonna go around the village and say, oh.
No,
yeah.
no, this would be part of the zoning ordinance, so everybody's homes are already grandfathered in that respect, so it would just be new homes, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Or I guess some change that would have you, I mean, if you just change the air conditioner, it's not gonna trip the requirement, but I guess if you added on and went through that.
If you added a generator that you didn't have before.
That's a frequent occurrence here.
that-
Every
that-
time there's a power outage, someone gets a new generator,
Yeah.
or adds one that didn't have one beforehand. And if if this were in place, we could require them to landscape that
Which
generator
I think
to
is a
some
good
degree.
idea.
Solar panels.
That too.
I landscaped around it.
I know, I remember.
Solar panels.
So I think I'm hearing a consensus for maybe trying to do something for landscaping around mechanicals and just leave the structures, sheds part out of it. Is that,
Yes,
is that
yeah.
a fair statement of
Yeah.
people's views?
I agree.
I'll take that as a yes.
Should we use the word new? Or,
Shield new mechanicals?
yeah,
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
okay.
Yeah, I think at this point, we all seem to be on the same page with these two items. Again, we don't have to make them perfect tonight. I just wanted, like I said, I was going to address this, and I wanted to address it publicly. We've gone through it. I think now there should be an understanding of why we can't do the other things that, they've come up multiple times. So I don't think we need a motion tonight for anything.
You don't.
So let's just let Ken and Evgeny and Dirk work on this, and we'll bring it up on a,
Whatever the
I'm not-
first.
okay.
I also like number 8 too.
Ken, I'm gonna be out of the country for, what do you mean?
Maybe April? Okay,
April.
all right, thank you.
You-
Out of the country.
So number 8, we went over, that's legally problematic.
Yeah,
And then, but
well, an ordinance amendment that encourages preserving tree and canopy
well, and that,
would be, yeah,
and we have that.
yeah.
Where did I read that? About placement preference. That's already in there. Um, Well, I can't find it now, but we do have, that was in there to make an effort to, the preservation and conservation of trees, woodlands, associated vegetation, related wildlife, and other natural resources shall have priority over development when there is a feasible and prudent location alternative on site for proposed buildings, structures, and other improvements.
It's 9308A.
Right. I feel that speaks to that.
And so does B. The integrity of woodland areas should be maintained irrespective of whether such woodlands cross property lines. Sort of the same
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah, kind of like what runs between my house and everybody else around Snow Creek, yeah.
So thank you for taking time to think about this. Sorry
Okay.
that I didn't make it more clear, but I just really wanted to get to this so that the public can see we are making an effort on that. I think we made some good progress, and there's a clear understanding of what we can and we cannot do. But I still feel like we're on woodland ordinance. Did you want to speak to the invasive species, branch
Sure.
chipping, and residential tree planting program?
Yeah, let me do that.
It's okay.
So in your packet, there's a memo that I have produced for you. I will just read these through. There are links to various invasive species as categorized by the Michigan Invasive Species Program that have been uploaded to the village website under Village News. It's been there for months, actually. We are a member of the Oakland County Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area, which is known as SISMA. The program coordinator welcomes the opportunity to speak with residents at a workshop regarding invasive species control, removal, etc. And we hope to have something on the calendar in April. We just went through today and blacked out dates that have meetings on them already, like Monday, our meeting and the planning commission meeting and the road commission meetings. So so we obviously don't want to double up on that. I've also looked into this branch chipping concept, which was brought up by a member of the community, chipping branches in residential properties. We have a contract with Beverly Hills for Public Works Department functions, and they just don't have the staff to handle this. I did bring it up with Johnson Landscaping, and they did suggest that they could handle it on a once-a-month basis, 7 months out of the year, and the estimate would be about $21,000 for the year. I'm happy to ask Jerry to explore this a little further, and we could implement it. It's up to council. I can't approve an expenditure of that nature without council approval. Finally, there is a residential tree planting program that Plymouth Township operates. Trustee Jones brought this to my attention. I have spoken with the township supervisor. I haven't quite formulated this out yet, but I will, and I will present that at the council with a future meeting. Getting back to the branch chipping, I'm not sure that in light of what we're dealing with, that's an expenditure we want to start.
I'd like to agree, we've got to show some reserve on our spending.
It's not a bad concept. When I worked in Lathrop Village, we had this every once a week all year long, and other communities do it either seasonally or all the time as well, and it's helpful for your residents. On the other hand, I mean, it's not free either. So,
When you say branch trimming, what are you talking about?
like if you say you have a branch that
Chipping.
yeah, chipping,
not trimming.
branch chipping.
Oh,
So what we would do, what we used to do in Lathrop Village was anything that was 6 inches or less in diameter, you could put it at the street side, and the contractor would come around with a chipper.
I'd keep them busy for a day.
It just and we limited it. They could spend no longer than 10 minutes per household, because people could do what you just said. There were always issues with people putting out too much or putting out logs and expecting them to be hauled away. But nevertheless, by and large, it was a pretty good program. Again, it's not free, so something that we could do, and it would help folks as far as maintaining their landscaping. But I'm not sure that we want to undertake this. Yes,
Do you know if Franklin has?
they do not.
They do.
They do not. Yes.
It's
Our trash company picks up branches, small ones. My neighbors put them out and tie them together, and they cut them 4 feet long. And all season long, all summer, that's where.
They don't have a chipper though.
No.
But they will
Is
collect
that
it small.
What is the benefit to the residents with the chipper? Is having the chips, or?
Well, they chip them and take them away. In Lathrop Village, we had a DPW yard, and there was piles of chips there, and people could come and collect it as mulch
Yeah.
and use it.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be happening in this case, because Jerry Johnson's yard is in Pontiac.
Probably not.
I can tell you what the benefit is over normal yard waste collection. Right now, you're correct. Residents can bundle sticks no longer than a certain length, and car trucking after April 11th will be picking up that yard waste. This is for stuff like, imagine there's a storm, and you got a limb that came down that's 5 inches in diameter and 20 feet long.
Yeah, I have one.
I live in Southfield, I can leave that at my curbside, and they will pick it up on garbage day and chip it, and I don't have to do anything to it, I don't have to cut it up into those 4-foot sections, they just grab
They
it.
need to come back in the backyard and completely cut it off the tree because it's still huge.
So that's the benefit over
Yeah.
normal yard waste collection.
Yeah.
It's a lot
Okay.
more economical when you have, I mean, I assume they're using a Southfield employee that's doing that.
It is my understanding that City of Southfield has their own trucks and equipment and their own landscaping yard. And then I think I've never taken advantage of it yet, but they take it a step further and residents can actually request like a yard of mulch to be delivered to their house and
Wow.
they'll dump it. Now, their mulch is not as uniform as what you would get at a landscaping supply place, but if
Nice.
that's what you need,
It's not dyed
it's
red or
nice.
black or
It just seems,
brown or.
for $3,000, a turn seems expensive.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
Especially
I
when
feel
you-
like it was a good suggestion and something that I appreciate the staff researching, but I think we're faced with so many cost increases right now that this would
Yeah,
Be a little
maybe
bit-
visit it later.
irresponsible
We need
for
to
us
show
to.
I'm sure
fiscal
that-
Right.
responsibility.
I'm sure that Johnson Landscaping would, I mean, we're not gonna break their heart if we tell them that we're not interested at this point in time, but I'm sure they would be happy to entertain it in the future,
Right.
in the future year.
There's other communities as well that don't have the woods that we have,
That's true.
you know, where you can drag your branches and stuff and leave it for wildlife.
That's
So I
true.
feel like in the other communities, it's a little bit more helpful when you don't really have anywhere to
Yeah.
put this stuff. But we do
Yeah.
here,
And we also have an open burn policy too, so.
Yeah,
right,
that's,
yeah. So, is there anything else with that,
no.
Ken, that
There
you
is
wanted to
not.
discuss?
Well, I just wanted to mention that the residential tree planting program is something that I'm semi-excited about. I'm hoping that we can do it, just because, we get a lot of residents who are really worried about, keeping the trees and that sort of thing, and I am too. It's just that most of the things they want us to do, we're not legally able to do. So if we were able to have a tree planting program, that would be great, just in terms of, it would be a way to replace some of the trees. And
Yes.
so I'm hoping that we can come up with a way to do that. I'm not sure that we can. I don't know that we can use.
You can do it, and in fact, Bloomfield Hills has had one for the last 2 or 3 years, so Ken, you may want to check with Dave Hendrickson, the city manager.
Yeah.
He'd be happy to share the details with you. It's been very successful, great demand for it.
Another point too is that Oakland County yearly has, I wouldn't call it trees, they're seedlings that you can get. And I've participated in that, so you might get 10 to 100 seedlings for a fairly nominal fee. The problem is they're seedlings, so it takes a while. The ones in my yard, that's the other problem. A lot of the majority of the trees in my backyard were from seedlings, but I might plant 30 or 40 of them, of which 3 survive.
Yeah, I'd be interested to understand that.
Yeah.
Is there a motion that we need to do on this?
No.
Not now.
No,
Okay, yeah.
I know it says motion, but
Yeah, we'll come up with some language
gonna-
for some of these related items and
Yeah.
we'll present them to you probably in April.
okay, we are gonna move to the Road Project Advisory Committee. I just wanted to include an update from one of the trustees who is a liaison on that committee, just to kind of keep us in the loop. I'd like every month, just, it doesn't have to be extravagant or whatever, but just sort of like what's happening, how's it going, anything that you think that
Yeah, I
council
think
would find
right now,
interesting.
we've had 2 meetings, both very positive. I think the crew that we have there is gonna bring out some pretty decent stuff. We had the guys from HRC there, so some great questions were asked. We've got Bill showing up next week, so we have an idea of what monies. I think that at that point, then we'll really start. We might make a few different committees, get going, and come up with some suggestions at that point.
Just for clarification, that's this week.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes, okay, not next week. we'll see you on Wednesday, yes?
Yes,
Okay.
that to me is next week, yeah. I go by my work schedule.
I see, all right. Pardon me.
I would just, first of all, I agree with everything that Dee just said, and I just wanted to raise one thing, because one of the people on the committee, Tony, and I'll mispronounce her name,
Yes.
Green, I believe it is, had a couple suggestions, which she said that, in the comment section, which she said maybe should be raised, or at least council should be made aware of sooner rather than later, just because it would take time to like implement them. And one of them was, and her suggestions were aimed at trying to make any proposal more palatable to people who live on private roads. And the first was the possibility of changing some of the private roads to public roads, so that they would have the same benefits from a road reconstruction project. This was, I know we had talked once before about giving funds to the private roads, and that we couldn't do because we couldn't give public money to private roads, but actually changing the roads to public roads, I mean, that's not, I don't think, an easy thing to do. The question about like, what are the standards that you are required for a public
Fortunately,
road
did it.
versus what,
Yeah.
but it's something that is a possibility. And the second one that you mentioned, which might be, I think, of interest to you, Trustee Howard, was the chance of maybe piggybacking a public road construction project with a private road reconstruction. In other words, let's say we're redoing Bingham Road, and your condo association is at the same time redoing
Outlet
your
Trail.
roads, then maybe you could get like a break from the construction company for them to, as long as they had their equipment there to do your roads at the same time they were doing, Bingham. So that was something she mentioned that she wanted to have brought before council as soon as possible, so we could at least be thinking about that.
Well, especially if we do a phased approach, meaning we're going to be doing a road at a time. It gives more opportunity for the private roads to join us, as opposed to doing all of our roads at one time.
Right, and
Yeah.
just since you mentioned that, I'll mention that I actually asked the planners, would that be-
Engineer?
engineers, whether we could do all of our roads at one time, and he suggested that he didn't think that was feasible, even
Yeah.
if we wanted to.
Traffic flow.
It would take
Yeah.
several years to do it, so
Yeah.
that's just my addition to Dee's
Yeah.
comments.
Thank you for that. I think it's good to keep that flow of information going back and forth. We are on to new business. We have a planning commission appointment. Ken,
Yeah.
start it out.
Thank you. Bill Burrell, a longtime planning commissioner, his term has expired, and he expressed an interest a firm desire to not seek reappointment, and I thanked him for his years of service and posted the notice on the website. We had one person who answered that bell. He's sitting in the room today. His name is Mike Deroni, and he was on the design review board for quite a few years. He has expressed an interest, filled out the form. Lisa interviewed him, and there's a proposed motion at the bottom of the memo to appoint Mike to a 3-year term to expire in February of 2027. He does not require to give a speech today.
Oh, come on, Mike.
Unless you want to say something.
No.
No?
No, I didn't know I was the only one. I wrote too much in my application.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for.
So, with that, I would like to move to appoint Mike Deroni to the Village of Bingham Farms Planning Commission for a 3-year term to expire in February of 2027.
I second. Is that a second?
Yep.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Welcome aboard. Thank you for putting your hat in the ring.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
You will be a welcome addition, I'm sure. Thanks, Mike.
So I won't call you tomorrow to let you know you're in. We're moved to the Budget Committee. This is something I just wanted to put on the agenda to make sure that we have a firm Budget Committee. Trustee Howard and Trustee Crable are our Budget Committee, and if you would like to continue doing it, just like any of the other appointments, you can continue, but I just wanted to make sure that everything is set because it's going to be time to start meeting with our treasurer and get that going underway. I know last year it was a little bit more difficult because our treasurer had just started and we have 2 travelers, so I'm just gonna throw out there that we could do this also through Zoom, or even different conversations and coming together. So I just want to make sure that
I'm on board for the
everybody's
commitment.
going.
Same.
Okay, so
There's no need for a
there's
motion.
no, right, okay. Okay, good. Thank you for stepping up to do that, and we'll be looking forward to the budget.
Speaking of that,
Yeah, speaking of the budget, we need to move to the treasurer's report and approve some bills.
Good
Bill?
evening, good evening. Thanks. Thanks, President Blackburn. Yes, we do have 2 motions. We have 2 motions under the treasurer's report. The first one, as always, is to approve the bills. And check disbursements report, which are in your packet, are for the dates of January 20th, 2024 through February 22nd, 2024. And in total, $209,668.68. I do want to call to everybody's attention. That's a little bit larger, and the reason is last council meeting, Trustee Jones made a motion that passed to do an additional contribution to the MERS pension fund, which we did, and I did process just here earlier shortly after the council meeting. And what we did is we placed $30,000 in what is called the unassociated surplus account, like we did a few years back as well. So that's sitting in the designation of S1 surplus unassociated. It gives us an awful lot of flexibility. What I mean between that is it went into MERS, it can't be pulled back out, but we can move it to the general fund, back to the unassociated fund if we need to. What it does where it's at now is it actually speeds up the process of getting closer to 100% funded pension the way that it's positioned. If we find out that after we go through and review the budget that we need to back off because the budget numbers aren't coming to where we need them to come in on a budget, we can move that into the general fund, which would alleviate a little bit of the contributions that we make to the DB pension portion of it to give us a little bit more breathing room. So it's kind of really the best of both worlds. It worked out great. We've been obviously benefiting from that contribution that we made a few years back, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that that's what actually took place. The check disbursement for the gas and weight fund for the same dates, January 20th, 24 through February 22nd, 2024, totaled, it was one invoice for $11,280, and it was from Johnson's Landscaping. I did receive a question on that. We had a number of different saltings that they needed through the month of January. We actually had 12 saltings, 5 plowings, and 1 road clearing. So that's why that amount, based upon the weather, is a little bit larger than we see on average. It's obviously dependent upon the weather.
Can I ask you a question about
Yes, absolutely.
What roads does that, is,
What we do is, he meters it, but the way that we take and disperse it is we use a percentage of 60% of the expense goes towards major roads, 40% of it goes to local roads as far as appropriation of how we divide the expense between the 2 funds.
okay, so it's just the roads, has nothing, what about sidewalks?
To my knowledge, I don't think he just, it's salting and plowing of public roads.
And about how many miles is that?
You know what, Deb, I don't know, I can find that out. Remember that,
Is it 5 point?
yeah, okay. But we've got to make sure that you understand that Telegraph is
Right,
by
yeah.
MDOT, and then Oakland County Road Commission takes care of 13-mile road and 14-mile road.
14, yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So the total between the two funds, both general and gas and weight, totals to $220,948.68. And look forward to, if you have any other questions, please let me know. But now it's council's motion to go ahead and approve bills.
Do I hear a motion to approve the bills for February 2024?
I move that we approve the bills as submitted for February 2024.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you
Great.
very much.
Item B, the second motion that's on the treasurer's report, as always, is accept the financial statements for January 2024 and the current investments for January 2024. As I always go through every month, when we look at the budget to actual, we're now 7 months into the fiscal year, 58.3%. We're tracking exactly all along where we did same time last fiscal year. So we're right in line. Everything is right in line. The other thing that I will mention is on the current investments, that obviously is included in your packet as well. It is growing. I will notice, and I talked to Trustee Jones a little bit about this when he happened to be in the office a little bit earlier this week, that some of the interest rates, we are seeing them tick down a bit, but I'm still taking advantage of ones that are there. They're slightly lower. We're seeing, the market move a little bit. So there's two things that I'm really gonna that focus on. One, we just renewed one for Canadian Imperial Bank that was like 0.25 less, but we've taken that out 182 days. That was the best rate. They actually added a little bit to what their published rate was when I actually went to go meet with them. So that's good news. And then the other thing is, as I'm taking a look again at what CDs and investment products are out there, so that we still hit the balance of making sure that we have funds that are very liquid that we can tap into should we need it, but still look at maybe another 12-month CD that I'm working with at Independent Bank on their rates and looking at against other various rates that are out there so that we can still maintain the highest rate that we have right now for a little length of time without impacting, again, our liquidity. And any questions that you have on the general fund or the road fund investments, again, I'm always happy to answer or go find the answer for you.
I think I know the answer to this because we talked about it earlier, but last meeting we discussed whether we needed to move the $150,000 to the road fund, and my understanding is that you've taken care of that. We don't need a motion or anything like that.
That's correct. Check and done. So, and I'm also going to be presenting that as part of the road committee this week on Wednesday. That fund it's in the audited numbers. We've moved it there, discussed it with our auditor, Raina. We're all set. I made the journal entry just to keep the books up to what the audited portion is, but we've done $150,000 for the last 3 years. We have $450,000, and we will continue to do the same for this next fiscal year should we have a surplus. We are going to, again, try to make that commitment to add the other $150,000 to the general fund availability for roads in the general fund versus the restricted fund. Any other questions?
If there's no questions, do I hear a motion to accept the financial statements?
I will so move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
We are finally getting to trustee comments. Trustee Hedge?
I just wanted to say thank you to Dirk for all his work and all the time for the for the ordinances. And you explained it really well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Trustee Howard?
I'm very optimistic about the outcome for our road project because of a much broader constituency feeling that they're gonna own that project, thanks to the advisory committee. So I appreciate their work, and I just look for good recommendations coming forward from them. And I hope that we can act on those information on a timely basis in May.
Mm-hmm. Great.
You're
Trustee
welcome.
Bingham?
I don't have anything else.
No.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. With that, I need a motion.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? What time is it?
9:20.
Thank you for getting me on.